Welcome everyone. Today we have our new episode, and this episode is very important. Especially we will discuss on vaccine passport. This is very new topic, very important topic. We have our world famous speaker and analyst, Professor Rob. We have our friends, Mr. James Eid from Eid Foundation, and we have our friend Mr. Adam from UK. Professor Rob, vaccine passport is a very important topic right now, and even World Economic Forum, they are doing some survey and research through IPSOS, but still I think much people, they do not know much about the vaccine passport and these issues. If you help us to understand this process and how it will work in the future and how it will be valuable for our communities, it will be really effective for us.
Well, vaccine passports, for the most part, actually aren't a global thing yet. They're a global discussion. The idea of a vaccine passport is in lieu of doing massive shutdowns of an economy. You have passports that allow people that are vaccinated to continue to go to business venues and collect in groups safely. It has two benefits. One, they tend to drive people to get vaccinated, because if you're vaccinated, you get privileges, and if you're not vaccinated, you lose those privileges. And number two, they provide areas where people can congregate in groups relatively safely. This is assuming they're done properly. Now let's talk about doing them properly. Then we'll talk about a couple of the negatives. Doing them properly means that they have to be accurate. In other words, if somebody has a vaccine passport, they actually have to be vaccinated. The vaccine certificates that we've got now, at least here in the United States, have been broadly copied and duplicated in many cases, and so you can't really trust them. The passports to work have to be trustworthy, because if you can't trust them, they're not doing any good. And of course, the veracity of the environments that are supposed to be safe would then be challenged. Now, the negatives with regard to the vaccine passports are that not everybody can get vaccinated, and so they can perform have versus have not kind of situation, where in environments where only the wealthy or the affluent get vaccinated, then only the wealthy and the affluent get passports and can do things. That can exacerbate inequality that may already exist in a particular region. So for a vaccine passport to work, it has to be applied equally to everybody, regardless of sex, socioeconomic level, or whatever. And so do the vaccines. If the vaccines are just going to the wealthy and the passports are just going to the wealthy, then they just become another way to separate the haves from the have-nots. And typically society doesn't appreciate that. Particularly the have-nots don't appreciate it. So in the end, it's a stopgap method when a virus is out of control, as it is in many areas right now, to keep businesses from having to close down and to provide people with a safe place where they can congregate. So that's kind of the net.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have our another world famous expert, Professor Donald. So Professor Donald, how do you want to analyze this vaccine passport? Because this is very important topic, and we need to create more awareness on vaccine passport. Yes.
Well, it's been something that's controversial for some reason. In the United States, there's states that have made it illegal, quite a few states, and their logic is that people should have the choice of whether they take the vaccine or not. And the idea is that there's a lot of ambiguity about whether the vaccine is good for you or not. And some of the fears that they have are that there's if the current microchips are, say, 8th generation, the ones that are in the vaccine are like 12th or 15th generation, because they have, they're incredibly small. They have batteries that last for decades, and all kinds of magical properties that have been invented by Bill Gates that will track you forever. They're untested. They're They have all these magical properties, and in any event, people don't want to, and they don't work. So anyway, people don't want to take the vaccines. My wife works at a healthcare place, and like 30% or 40% of the people that work in the healthcare setting don't get vaccinated. And people believe that they want to have that choice. There's a cartoon that's been circulating around. It's sort of a meme from the days of smallpox. And it's exactly the same thing. The evil government is forcing people to get the smallpox vaccination and removing their choice and their freedom. And they did. They actually forced people to get it. So basically, people look at the vaccine as the vaccine passports in the United States as a way of government control that's forcing them to get the passport, forcing them to take the vaccine. It's a kind of odd, but it provides a way that we can kind of force people to do it, because I have on my phone, it'd take me a second to get it. I'll show it to you later. I have a QR code from the state of California that shows that I've been vaccinated, and I can show it anywhere, and it proves that to get to it, I have to use my fingerprint, and it shows that I've been vaccinated. It's not a vaccine passport because the state of California doesn't require that you have it. So the idea of a vaccine passport is that it would be legally required, but any place can say, we're not going to let you in unless you can prove you've been vaccinated, and this is proof that I've been vaccinated. So it allows us to start being able to do that, and unless we can do that, we're not going to be able to stop COVID. So vaccine passports are something that we've really got to do. I'll talk about them more later, but all I can say is that's something it's something we've got to do.
Thank you. Mr. Jamsit.
Thank you, Sharif. Yes, this is an interesting and evolving topic because regulations are usually trailing behind reality. And so we're just catching up. People in New York City and California are passing regulations now to govern this and requiring it in cases of medical personnel and that sort of thing. But I think we need to start with the basic civics. What are rights versus privileges? And people get caught up. We're a very litigious society, and we're very caught up in rights. But you have the right to walk on your own land. You don't have the right to walk on my land, and I can extend you the privilege of walking on my land if I invite you on it. So there are different things. Like if you want to mingle in society, that's a privilege. It's not a right. You cannot come to places that you are not invited. There are properties that are private, and you cannot come on them. So there are laws and regulations that we must follow to have a civil society. And sometimes these come into conflict. You think you have a right to it, and someone says, no, it's a privilege that I'm not giving you. And then there's a lawsuit, and then there's legal consequences, and who knows. But the other thing that I wanted to bring out, and Donald touched about it, we can have QR codes. Right now I have a little certificate that says I've been vaccinated. And as Rob pointed out, those can be copied. But, the cheaters are always a step ahead. So whatever technology that we use, there will be cheaters that exploit it and get around it. But I think there's just a small percentage of the people that are going to be cheating to get around it. And we want to do what's best for the most. And I think we can do that. But the idea that you don't have the right to, or you have the right to not be certified that you have been vaccinated, and you can do anything you want, is a fiction. It's in the United States. It's the Statue of Liberty. It's not the Statue of License. You don't have a license to do anything you want. So your liberties are curtailed by your obligations to society. And this is one of the things. If I carry an infectious disease into a crowded room and infect others, I have no right to do that. So I have to bear the consequences of my doing that. And what are the consequences of me going in and infecting people and some of them die? Well, just imagine what the proper just consequences for that action would be. So I don't have the right to take others' lives. I don't have the right to infect other people with a virus that may or may not kill them, but could severely incapacitate them. He can give them consequences that last the rest of their lives. That's not my right. I don't have that right. So I felt I must get vaccinated as soon as I could. And in California, that actually took some doing, but we got it done. And and I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to go. And if they require me to show proof that I've been vaccinated, I will comply. It's my obligation as a citizen. So that's what I had to say to start. Thank you very much, Sharif. Good topic.
Thank you. Mr. Adam.
Thank you very much, Sharif, and thank you again for the invite. Good to see you and the others again since yesterday. I must admit, my eyes lit up when I got the message about today and today's topic, vaccine passport. This is a topic I really do not sit on the fence with. I feel quite strongly about it. I think that people are affected with a certain kind of bias, where they think humans get progressively more progressive, open-minded, tolerant, accepting, and that this progress follows a neat and steady upward trajectory from some mythical dark age up and up and up to an equally mythical golden age. And I'm very skeptical of that. In fact, I think it is downright untrue. This bias includes the conclusion that even the very near past within this century, like 30s, 40s, and 50s, and so on, was part of that dark age. Not as dark as the ages before it, but still a kind of black hole that needed improving on. And in the short span of a couple of decades to where we are now, people think we are comfortably going up to a more progressive and brighter future in the space of a few years, and we'll see it come to fruition fully within their lifetimes, our lifetimes, or more unbelievably still within this decade. And of course, it's not true. And progress across historic timelines is cyclical, where empires and civilizations rise and fall. And our time is no different, I believe. What I mean is, people think we are lucky enough to live in a time when we can finally trust our governments and authorities, no matter where, no matter when. And then the track record is not exemplary when it comes to morals and ethics. We need to be careful, very careful with what governments demand of us, including even now. And they must be prepared to stand up and say no. And I find this situation quite disturbing and unsettling. I'm quite sensitive when it comes to situations where I think there is some level of coercion and widespread mass public shaming going on. And I fear that the vaccine situation will trigger a modern day witch hunt scenario. And it wasn't that long ago since we had East Germany and its Stasi secret police. And again with the Soviet Union, with the KGB and the horrific Bolshevik incident where people were massacred. And that was not that long ago, and Hitler and the Nazis as well. So we need to be quite cynical and stoic and prepare for the worst when it comes to government deception, not only with the vaccine itself, but also with the passport. And I'm concerned for the future. This situation makes me very nervous. I don't mean to sound conspiratorial or alarmist even. I'm just trying to communicate how strongly I feel about this, which is better than sitting on the fence over such a serious topic. And I now understand better the feminist pro-choice maxim of my body, my choice when it comes to abortion. I now understand that way of thinking much better. This is my body, so I should have more sovereignty over it, surely. And we need to be careful that global society doesn't bifurcate into a schism where you have two main castes, for lack of a better word, haves and have-nots, as said earlier, namely the vaccinated and unvaccinated, which is medical apartheid, basically, if at its worst. But like with pro-life leaders, I don't like being told what to do to my body or what others want to do to my body, or told what I should let go into my body by myself or someone else. And even in the World War One and World War Two, you had conscientious objectors where such people lost everything for standing by their principles, friends, families, respect, careers, and were at risk of being given a humiliating white feather from girls and women, a humiliation that would have stuck with them for life. And I feel that a modern counterpart to such aforementioned incidents and biases and injustices is on its way. So it's very interesting to observe how transhumanism has developed within my own lifetime. I was a very enthusiastic follower of transhumanism in my early teens, and seeing it develop into a negatively loaded term as it is today in some circles because of incidents like this, well, situations like this and others, is very compelling for me. And I imagine there will be black market demands for counterfeit vaccine passports for those who are, again, really risking losing everything, not to submit to getting something which appears rushed compared to other vaccines that were developed and tested and experimented on over long periods of time, and using legitimate grievances, no matter what you think about people who might have, one foot in conspiracy circles and they might be super alarmist, but surely it's still their decision, no matter how informed or misinformed they are. I mean, of course, it's something that affects other people as well because of the nature of the pandemic. But there's talk of genetic alteration after receiving this, and I remember reading or hearing something very strange about the FDA, who consider lab animals after genetic experiments to be drugs, strangely enough, as the guidelines and legislation is not quite caught up yet with the genetic frontier, so it's a way to claim ownership over these genetic alterations. And does that mean people who are vaccinated will be considered to be property of the big pharma machine? Well, who knows? I mean, so when you look at this through a historical lens, while still being mindful of MK Ultra and racially targeted coercive sterilization experiments in the first half of the 20th century, the future doesn't look so bright in my mind, through my eyes. And you see all these parody music videos and songs encouraging the masses to take it, and it just doesn't sit right with me. It seems like it's propaganda. But again, sorry for being a bit alarmist, but that's how I feel. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Today we have actually special day, Professor Rob's birthday. So happy birthday, Professor Rob. You are excellent scholar for us, and I'm really impressed. Every moment I learn from you, and like all of our speakers, actually excellent how they're contributing for World Talent Economy Forums, and Professor Rob actually from day one, how continuously you support and our academia, our youth communities, our policymakers. They really like your contribution. We want to see you a long time. You contribute for us, and with your excellent knowledge, we will change our society, and definitely they will get a specific guideline for us. So happy birthday, Professor Rob. Wish you all the best. Wish you good health and good cares and everything, and send regards to your family. So Professor Rob, very important day for you, but you join. I'm really impressed how everyone, even yesterday Professor Donald joined, even his father died. I'm really impressed, and it gives us a lot of like commitments that how dedicated you are for your work, and our youth community especially can learn from you how dedicated you are for knowledge-based like developments and other things. And I always believe that especially developing nations, they are sometimes, I want to say, misguided, that yeah, we have many rich people but we do not need knowledge. But no, like see Professor Rob, Professor Donald, Mr. James Adams, they are highly knowledgeable people, and they are contributing, and this is the way we should learn. This is the way we should develop. That's why our core focus on education, because we need a learned group of people. Even in my entire life, even I say one single person like you, I will be really happy. Like they at least learn, they at least try to learn and try to contribute. So Professor Rob, what do you want to add more when we are discussing on a vaccine passports, and there are many complex issues? Still, many people do not get vaccine, but good point in Malaysia, the government trying the level best. They are providing vaccine, and yes, I got my vaccine. And what next? How we can manage a proper strategy for this vaccine passport and vaccine distributions? This is very complex issues, I know, but how we can solve it?
Well, the issue with the vaccine passports, and I think Adam kind of showcased it in his comments, is they're not being properly marketed. The difficulty is people don't like to be told what to do. It's the reality of the world. Whether we're talking about the pandemic of the early 1900s or this pandemic, we have a similar problem, and that's a lot of people revolting with regard to taking the vaccine, let alone having a certification for it, because they're concerned about the government. And of course, as a result of their inaction, we're losing hundreds of thousands, well, millions of people a day now are dying, and you don't come back from death. Now in trials, they've shown where you can take some of the people that are resisting the vaccines and you can explain to them the underlying risks. The exchange of a percentage of a fraction, 1% of a problem with the vaccine, or several percentage problem without it, so that your chance of dying goes up by several magnitudes if you don't vaccinate. And if you do it right, you can actually turn some of the vaccine skeptics into the vaccinated. The other thing you can do is you could just take them into the hospital and show the number of people on ventilators and how horrible that underlying experience is, or just provide the data on the people that have had the virus and are now effectively crippled for life. But we're not doing a lot of that. We're mostly saying, hey, you either take the vaccine or you don't participate, and folks are rebelling against that. And with regard to responsibilities and with regard to responsibilities and force and status, the vaccine passport as it exists is actually supposed to prevent total shutdowns, which of course are an economic disaster. If you don't have vaccine passports or something like them, and you have an outbreak, you're going to have to shut down again. People are going to be out of work again. People are going to be locked in their homes again. They're not going to be able to get out. And in terms of exchange of freedom, which would you rather have? Would you rather be locked in your house, afraid of death or loved ones dying, or have a piece of paper that says that, hey, I actually am safe to be out and around, and your health is safe around me? It's a choice. It's nothing is perfectly ideal. And the fact of the matter is even with vaccine passports, you do have a choice of whether or not you put the vaccine in your body or not. You can choose not to. It just means you don't have a series of privileges that you would otherwise have if you got vaccinated. It's to protect the people around you. If this was something like, it's funny that a lot of the memes that are going on here are memes about, car brakes or seat belts or other things you have to have in order to be around other people or to be safe. Motorcycle helmets. We had a major rebellion on motorcycle helmets, and the reason behind the motorcycle helmets, it wasn't that you didn't have the right to bash your brains in. It was because generally the medical cost of you bashing your brains in exceeded whatever insurance you had, and that became a cost on the state. And so the state decided, hey, you're going to have to wear a helmet because we're not going to pay for your medical bills if you bash your brains in. And so helmets became a requirement. And that's really part of the role of a state, is to protect its population, whether it be financial viability or just general health. It's really what they're supposed to do. Health passports are actually well within the purview of a government when they're designed to protect the populace. They're not viable, though, if you were to do it for some of the reasons that Adam articulated. If you're doing it to separate the haves from the have-nots, if you're doing it to provide privilege to certain people that are connected versus people that are not, those are reasons why a vaccine passport should not be used, because it's not a vaccine passport. It's just a passport of privilege. And so there becomes the underlying problem. And so if you're going to be successful with vaccine passports or even getting people vaccinated, it does require a relatively high level of focused advertising that goes that goes and speaks to the reason why people aren't getting vaccinated. You know, it fascinates me because if you look back at the vaccines we had in the early 1900s, they weren't tested anywhere near the level of testing that these vaccines have been tested. We didn't have the science for it. I mean, the fundamentals, so many things have changed over the last 100 years. It's kind of funny. Look at the polio vaccine, the thing that stopped polio. It probably wouldn't get FDA approval today. I mean, because the level of testing that was done wouldn't meet their underlying standards. Yet it stopped polio. It's if you go back and look at the pictures of the wards we had when polio was running rampant, you know, we had hundreds of people in breathing machines because they couldn't breathe on their own thanks to the polio, and the very fact that we don't have to get vaccinations for polio now. I had one when I was a child, is because that vaccination program worked. And vaccination programs, by and large, work. It's the folks that are pointing these things and saying, well, you know, they're highly dangerous and you can't trust the government. Yeah, but how against the base of experience that we've got with vaccines is they generally work. We've been having flu vaccines for as long as I've been alive, and they generally work as well. When they don't work, it's largely because they've guessed wrong as far as the flu variant that's out there, and the vaccine doesn't cover it. But it's not like anybody's trying to fool you into taking something you're not supposed to. And as Donald pointed out, a lot of the rumors around the vaccines are just brain dead stupid. I mean, the idea that they're injecting you with a microprocessor. I mean, we can't get a microprocessor down to the point where it's smaller than the tip of your finger, let alone figuring out how you'd put it inside a needle and then supply it with power. I mean, if we had the capability of doing that, we could electronically fix blindness, a whole number of disabilities we have, and we could put nanomachines in our bloodstream to rebuild us and keep us young forever. None of that stuff's possible. Maybe possible in 40 or 50 years, but we clearly aren't there yet. And so most of at least many of the concerns that I've seen with regard to the vaccines are almost completely unfounded. And recent studies have showcased they're being sourced from 12 people. There are apparently 12 people out there that are spreading most of this misinformation, and a bunch of us are waiting for the litigation phase. And by the way, there will be a litigation phase. We're still in the midst of the pandemic, but as soon as we get out of this mess of the pandemic, there are going to be a lot of people with dead relatives that are going to want revenge against the people that were spreading this false information. And I gotta think it's going to be pretty expensive pretty fast, because as we know, the other thing we know about humans is they have a really long memory, and they don't really forgive all that easily. So you have all this false information flowing through. There's going to be a backlash against those people that are spreading it. So being really careful about what it is you're spreading, if it's false, would be wise if you want to have any kind of financial future. Not to mention there are opportunities for criminal charges as well. You give false medical information that causes somebody to die, you can be charged criminally for that. So it's called malpractice, and it has criminal implications. So in the end. And back to the vaccine passports, if done properly, the way they should be promoted is the fact that with them, you don't have to do a country shutdown. Without them, with viruses spreading fast enough to overcome your medical situation, you will have to do a shutdown, or you're just going to lose the viability of your medical environment. And you'll have entire groups of people of professions that become non-viable. You know, we just lost. It was like something like 12 firefighters to the virus in the middle of the largest fire in our state's history. And with the D variant, which can spread incredibly rapidly, you could lose an entire firefighting force against it, and if they're not vaccinated. And of course, we also know the vaccines as they exist are not 100% effective. They're more like 90% effective, which means 1 out of 10 people that get vaccinated are not protected. And more important, even with the vaccine, they don't necessarily prevent you from getting sick. They just prevent you from having to go to the hospital and reduce your chance of dying to almost zero, which means you can still, with the vaccine, get the virus and you can still spread it. So that makes it even more important that everybody get vaccinated, because then we get to something called herd immunity, where the mass, and that's really what works for us with polio and measles and some of the other things we've eradicated with antiviruses. You get to herd immunity, and if somebody is still vulnerable, they're protected because everybody around them doesn't have the virus. But we're nowhere near that. You have to get up close to 90% of the folks vaccinated before you get to immunity, and we're not even at 70%. In fact, number of the states in the United States aren't even at 30% vaccinated, and right now the prognosis for those states is pretty bad. Florida may have to shut down again, and their governor is not going to do it, which means you've got a lot of retirement communities that are likely going to get inundated with the virus before we're done. And these are all people that are dying and don't have to die. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't come back from death yet. At some future point, maybe it'll bring people back from death, but right now we cannot. Somebody dies, they are dead. You can't come back and say, oh, I'll take the virus this time because I was stupid last time. Yep, nope, you're dead. And if you watch the interviews of the people coming off the ventilators, the vast majority of them are saying if they had to do it over again, they would have taken the vaccine because they'd never want to go through that experience again. If you've ever been through it and you've ever had an attack, and I have, where you can't breathe, having your body suffocate you is one of the most terrifying events you can have. I remember lying on the bed. I couldn't catch my breath. I'm trying to call for help. You can't speak. The air just isn't coming in, and that's the death we're talking about with this particular virus. Is you lose the ability to breathe, and it is terrifying. It'd be like if somebody put a plastic bag over your head and didn't let you breathe. It is not an easy way to go into the darkness. So in the end, with regard to the passports, you just have to recognize that you do have a choice. You don't have to get the vaccine, but everybody else has a choice too, and their choice is not to be around you if you're unvaccinated because they don't want to die. And they don't want to have their kids die, and they don't want to have their grandparents die. And there's the difficulty. If one person in a group comes in unvaccinated and infects another person, and a child dies, how do you live with that? It's oopsies. I mean, honestly, I don't know. And we're going to have an awful lot of that in the next decade. The people going back and blaming relatives, friends for the death of loved ones because they weren't responsible and didn't take the vaccine and commingled. So the thing is you've got a choice. You can choose not to get the vaccine. You can choose not to get a vaccine passport, but you should also choose to stay away from your loved ones so you don't kill them. So that it seems to be an easy choice to me. I don't fundamentally understand how anybody could be so selfish to decide not to get a vaccine and then to continue to commingle and put everybody else at risk. I can understand not getting the vaccine. I can understand getting the vaccine to socialize. I cannot understand not getting the vaccine and socializing. To me, that means you're a psychopath or a sociopath, and you really don't understand the health and well-being of your friends, family, and your community. And that's problematic. And we've got to believe that a lot of these people on social media are eventually going to be branded that way, and they're gonna have exactly what Adam was pointed out as having. We're going to have folks really badly ostracized because of their behavior, and it's all avoidable. Shane.
Thank you, Professor Donald.
Unmute.
Rob laid it out very well. I want to reiterate his point, which is that the whole idea of freedom of choice, well, vaccine passports give it to you. You can choose not to get vaccinated, but the repercussions of that choice are that you probably, the place that you work has the right to say, we're not going to allow you to come and work. In fact, the state of California recently did that. They said you either have to get vaccinated or you have to get tested every week. Some people narrowed it to every 3 days, but that's up to you. And the VA just did it, which is the biggest medical organization in the United States. And a consortium of 50 medical organizations just wrote a letter demanding that people have vaccine passports. It's absolutely stunning that nurses have a very low vaccination rate, which is just stunning. And I'll give you an example. Is my wife works in a medical facility where some of the medical assistants aren't vaccinated. So she has a real dilemma. Let's just say somebody wants to come in for a medical visit. Well, she doesn't know necessarily if that person's been vaccinated or not. Could she have them come in for a medical visit? Well, that person could potentially have asymptomatic COVID, which means that she could give it to her medical assistant, who could give it to the other medical assistants inside the organization that haven't been vaccinated. So she basically has to say, no, you can't come in. We can't do a medical visit with you. We can't do medical visits with anyone because her medical assistants haven't been vaccinated. I mean, that's ridiculous. It makes it impossible to run a medical organization. So people, as Rob said, they're almost psychopaths to be able to do that. But I want to mention what he said too about the 12 people. The number one worst person for medical misinformation is a guy named Joseph Mercola. And he's basically a vitamin salesman who's been around for years passing out misinformation. If you go around California, and I don't know for sure about the rest of the country, you see signs everywhere that say gluten-free. Well, Mercola is the one that's responsible for saying that wheat poisons you. He wrote some books about how wheat poisons you. The celiac disease, which is a disease where gluten actually affects your digestion in negative ways, is really quite rare. And but yet, because of his book, lots and lots of people believe that they have this disease, which they don't. And so he created this whole industry of people believing that they're sick from wheat, just simply by creating it, just claiming that it's a problem. He's just the worst possible con artist. When I talked earlier in shows about medical con artists, this guy is absolutely the worst. Well, he is. I mean, it's been shown. He is the worst person for vaccine misinformation about the COVID vaccine. One thing I want to mention about COVID is that it's framed in terms of a binary issue, which is you either die or you don't die. And it's not that way because there's people who get lung transplants. Their lungs are so destroyed by COVID that they get a lung transplant. And they're in the checklist of the people who lived. They're the people who didn't die. Well, I mean, not dying and getting a lung transplant is a pretty heavy thing. I mean, you don't want to get a lung transplant. That's very intrusive and kind of messes up your whole life. And you're pretty lucky if you actually find somebody who has a spare set of lungs that you can get. A huge percentage of people who get COVID get long COVID, which is basically you don't get over it. You have brain fog. And there was an article just a couple of days ago that people who get serious COVID or even moderate COVID, their IQ goes down about 6 points. Now, I'm not sure, I couldn't tell from the article if that was about the cause and effect. I think that maybe people with IQs 6 point lower than everyone else are stupid enough that they don't get the vaccine, and and maybe they don't really know. But the vaccine passports, I think, are a fabulous way of just saying, okay, if you don't want to get the vaccine, well, fine, but. And I want to show you something. Let's see. Can you see this? Yes, you can see this. Oops. There we go. This is my vaccine passport. And that QR code is registered in a central database. They're forging the cards, but this is much more difficult to forge because if you, for one thing, I have to use biometrics to get into my phone. And for another thing, this is registered in a central database. So when they scan the QR code, they know it's me. So I can show an ID at the same time. and it can basically determine that it's actually me. So these are legally used in California now, and it can show that it's not a vaccine passport. It's up to any individual organization to say that, okay, we require this, but it's not required by the state. Instantly, if you work for the state, it's required now. Anyone that works for the state has to be vaccinated. Yeah, that's what I want to say right now, that kind of reiterate what Rob said and mention that issue about COVID. I just can't imagine that there's some, oh yeah, there is one other thing I wanted to say. There's different reasons that people don't get vaccinated, and I've mentioned the fear aspect of it, but there's also an own the libs aspect of it, which is the strangest thing. People don't get vaccinated for the reason that it pisses off the people that they don't like. And they're willing to actually die for this. And some of the consequences, I was reading a newspaper in Alabama where a nurse was talking about somebody that was just about to get ventilated. And when you get ventilated, you basically don't recover. I mean, even if you live, you're going to have brain fog for the rest of your life, and the PTSD that you're going to have from getting ventilated is so serious that you're never going to recover. And just before the person was ventilated, they said, "Well, can I get the vaccine?" And the nurse said, "It doesn't work that way. You're a goner." and so, people fundamentally don't understand it, but they're being told by people like Mercola and these right-wing talk show hosts like even Sean Hannity and these kinds of people on Fox News. They're being told that they have a less than 1% chance of dying. And they're also being told that 5,000 people have died because of the vaccine. And the reason that what they're being told, the reason that they're saying that is that after getting the vaccine, 5,000 people have died. Now, they didn't die from the vaccine, they just died. I mean, some of them got hit by cars. I mean, it wasn't the vaccine that killed them. And the number of people that they think that probably died because of the vaccine is 2. Out of the billions of people that have gotten the vaccine, there's probably 2 that actually died as a consequence of the vaccine. So the vaccine is incredibly safe. But they're being lied to. And an interesting statistic is fewer than half of the Republicans in Congress have gotten the vaccine, and 100% of the Democrats in Congress have gotten the vaccine. So it's gotten to be just kind of a identity thing, like that people don't get the vaccine for the specific reason that they want to associate with a certain group, affiliate with a certain group that's trying to make a statement against basically the status quo. And that's very difficult to address because facts aren't going to change it. They have this set of facts that they've chosen to believe, and they're not. And if the facts come from a different place, they choose to believe that the source of those facts is illegitimate, and they won't believe those facts. So it's a very difficult situation to do anything about. And that's one reason that the vaccine passports are essential, because we have to be able to have some sort of a way to basically isolate those people. It's true that if people can't get the vaccines, it's a terrible situation because we're isolating people who illegit, who just can't get them. But in the United States, that's not the case. Anyone can get the vaccine, and it's free. Vaccine passports are valuable, and as the vaccine becomes available everywhere in the world, they are a very good way of dealing with the situation of people who refuse to get it for whatever reason.
Thank you, Mr. Jamesit.
Thank you, Sharif. Yeah, I basically say ditto after what Rob was saying, but I will hit a couple of his points, his major points. But I agree, he basically summed up my position. Donald, I agree with most of what you said. I just thought it was unfortunate you picked celiacs because I have that. And if you're Irish descent, you will actually have higher chances of getting that. And so I do have a gluten-free diet. But that's just an unfortunate choice of an example there. But everything else you were saying I thought was spot on. And also, I don't think anyone's suggesting that Adam is one of the 12 people that is propagating falsehoods out here. I think he raises a legitimate concern. I do think that it is mostly down a slippery slope, and the arguments are not valid once they come under inspection, because no one's talking about putting a scarlet letter or a Jewish star on someone unvaccinated, and no one's compelling anyone to get the vaccination. And I totally agree with that. You have the right to make the choice for your own body. Absolutely. And if you don't want to get vaccinated, that is your right. But then you may, in fact, forfeit your rights, your privileges of mingling in society. And so if you're willing to make that choice, fine, do so. But you may not be able to become a medical professional. You may not become a nurse. You may not be able to come into contact with people that may be vulnerable. You may not be able to be a caretaker at a nursing home, for example. There are choices that you make. You can choose to be unvaccinated, but then the consequences of your choice are you may not be able to do everything you want to do. So you have no right to do everything you want to do. There are privileges that you will forfeit if you are unvaccinated. As long as you make that, you make that choice, fine. But it's irresponsible to go unvaccinated and then mingle in society where people may be vulnerable and you may infect them with horrible consequences. I can picture the iron lung in my youth, people that had the paralysis of their lungs, and they had to be kept alive by the iron lung, they called it. Oh my goodness, it was a nightmare. Scared the Jesus out of me. And the vaccinations have virtually eliminated polio and measles and these types of things. Yeah, I can remember lining up in school and getting a vaccination. It was simply no big deal. Now, the idea that is the government trustworthy or not, that's one of the biggest questions facing us. And yeah, the government does lie to us. Absolutely, it does. But this idea, these crazy ideas of Bill Gates putting chips in your arm, this is madness. This isn't a valid fear. This is madness. So we have to be clear and what are legitimate concerns and what are just wacko. And the problem with the wacko thoughts are that we're electing people who have run on these wacko thinking, and we've elected them to office. So we need to wake up and slap ourselves in the faces and come to our senses about this sort of thing. And yeah, a passport, we didn't have to have passports well, it wasn't that long ago when no one had passports at all. They could go to one country to another. We didn't have passports. Now we do. So, a vaccine passport might be very viable. There is nothing philosophically, fundamentally, or ethically wrong with it. It's just the way it is in order to function in society. And that's what we have to do. We have to balance our individual wants, desires, and needs versus our society's wants, desires, and needs. And we have to come in balance. And obviously, it's best if we all made the optimal choices, but we all aren't.
making the optimal choices, and we never will. So how do we figure this out? Unfortunately, in the United States, it'll be in the law, legal systems, and we'll sort all of that stuff out with lawsuits and people mad at other people. And this is an unfortunate cost of the society that we live in. But there are many benefits that outweigh it. So we have to balance all of these things. But the idea that this core principle is leading the idea of vaccinations, pro-vaccinations, is going to lead to a totalitarian state is not necessarily plausible. The idea that a vaccination system that with mass distribution available to everyone, which is in favor of a national healthcare system, to roll it out, how do you distribute it, how do you get everyone vaccinated so there aren't the haves and the have-nots based on access? Yeah, we should be all for that. Don't have haves and have-nots based on the ability to get it, but have the ability to choice, certainly. But realize when you make a choice, there are consequences of the choice that you make. So, yeah, governments do lie to us, but, when it comes to your health, I think you just have to get the best information and then realize that some of the information sources are not trying to inform you at all. They're trying to persuade you. So it's not just governments lying to you. It's popular people on TV that have an audience, built-in audience that is, and we've had a president that lied to us. We've had a president that lied to us about the vaccine. He knew better in February when he was telling us in March, well, we got 15 cases and we're going to go down to 0. He knew better. He was lying through his teeth. And you believed him. You told yourselves and others around you that he was telling it like it is. No, you were being lied to. So wake up. Don't be a patsy. I would suggest that you think about getting a vaccination if you want to participate in society. If you want to live out with the Unabomber, go right ahead. But if you want to participate in society, I'd say get vaccinated. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Like what Mr. James Eade said, seeing photos of people with polio trapped in iron lungs is very haunting, and I had never seen anything like it. Even the name iron lung conjures up disturbing feelings. But yeah, I'm a hopeless devil's advocate, so I apologise in advance. It's just for the sake of stimulating debate, of course. But yeah, in my lifetime, I have seen since my youth and teenagehood the mainstream and normalising of personal computers at home, and internet addiction starts becoming a problem. And then after that, social media explodes, and the devices get smaller and smaller. Social media influence grows, internet addiction skyrockets, porn addiction skyrockets. You can see it in people's eyes, this haunted look. You've had television present throughout all of these developments. People's decision-making and attention span shorten. Young people are watching shorter and shorter videos, can't listen to music albums, can't even listen to just one song from start to finish because they skipped the next song within 30 seconds of the one they put on previously. So you can feel that the everyday man and woman's impulse control, decision-making, resistance to status quo submission, all of these are being weakened, eroded. And I often ask myself, do parents and grandparents have denser neocortex in their children and grandchildren? So does that mean they can be more easily herded into situations that their parents and grandparents would have more fiercely stood up for against? So we should ask, can those who are worried about current affairs like this, can people relax enough to trust the general public mainstream? Can we trust public mainstream? Can they be trusted with electing the right people, the most appropriate leaders with these affected characteristics, like what Mr. James Eade said about people electing maybe unsuitable characters? But will they be blamed for being complicit in the minds of some in a situation for inaction, apathy, where rights are slowly being taken away bit by bit, like the frog being boiled slowly so that it doesn't notice the rising temperature until it's too late to save itself once the reality of its situation hits it and sinks into the poor frog? I think the proverb telling the story of a happy pig and an unhappy Socrates is kind of relevant to this topic, which is better to be an unhappy Socrates than a happy pig. And Rousseau, I think, expressed a similar sentiment where he's quoted as saying, I will choose dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery, which is commendable. But when you're actually in the middle of these situations, that's all well and good, but then you think, oh, actually, no. Dangerous freedom is a bit overrated. And I will never forget a quote from an article in a local newspaper about an old people's home suffering for what they said was punitive restrictions. And one of the people there said something shocking. They were quoted as saying, I would rather die of COVID than from loneliness. And that stuck with me and haunted me. And it loops back to the point I made about people who are willing to die for this. And I could then see many others in my friendship groups expressing similar sentiments. So will they, who are against the COVID vaccine and the passports, will they help create a kind of global crab in bucket situation where they bring down those who are vaccinated, extending the situation until goodness knows when? And will the dangerous freedom lovers compromise the vaccinated, where the vaccinated turn on them and blame them? This will create another division in an already divided society, with the unvaccinated pointing fingers, blaming the vaxxed for allegedly being complicit in the alleged interference of rights taken for granted. And in turn, the vaccinated may point fingers at the unvaxxed and blame them for their recklessness and selfishness, affecting the freedom, the quality of life of the vaccinated who just want to get on in life and go on days out and holidays and return to normal. And Mr. Donald Steiner raised a good point about this becoming a political issue, as if we need any more of that on an already fraught political climate where you have left-wingers overrepresented in the vaccinated population. And of course, right-wingers are overrepresented in the unvaccinated pockets. And a lot of kind of right-wingers are idolizing and agreeing with the Unabomber, believe it or not. They think he's a hero. And on that side of things, it's a kind of unholy alliance between the right, the conspiracists, the religious, the extreme. So I think we are in for some incendiary times ahead.
Thank you for joining today's sessions. From tomorrow 28 to 30 we have our conference on smart cities, so I believe that all of our speakers will join in this smart city conference, and share our content as much as possible. Share with your government, with policymakers, with think tank, with university and the corporations. Thank you for joining today's session. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today. First Professor Rob, then Professor Donalds, then James Seed, and finally Mr. Adam. Professor Rob.
So the key thing with regard to the vaccine and vaccine passports is really make your decision based on facts, not based on what you're being told to think about the subject. In the end, you have a right to be vaccinated or not. You do not have the right to show up in public venues unsafe and make those venues unsafe. But same underlying rules of walking into a theater. You can't walk into a theater and yell fire and get a bunch of people killed with impunity. There are going to be repercussions, and if you do that, people are not going to let you into theaters anymore. And certainly for those of us that grew up with no shoes, no shirt, no service, recognizing that no virus, no service is a huge ask on top of that. The reality is for a lot of us, when we go to church, we have to wear something on our head. When we show up to work, we have to wear, at least when I was working years ago, we had to dress appropriately. Those are rules, social rules that are put in place to allow society to function. And having a virus that keeps other people safe and undead, it would seem to be a superset of that rule set. So recognize that done properly, a vaccine passport could allow you to have at least some privilege during a pandemic. And without a vaccine passport, those privileges would have to be taken away for everyone because government doesn't have a heck of a lot of choice. A government cannot govern dead people. And at some point, even if you have too many people that are sick, a government can crawl to a halt, and suddenly your utilities don't work because there's nobody around to keep them running. And as much as I don't want to live in a Mad Max environment, I'm quite sure none of the rest of us do as well. So think through the evidence that you've got, make sure it's validated, make your own choice with regard to a vaccine, but recognize with regard to a vaccine passport, the reason for its existence is to prevent shutdowns. And if you don't like shutdowns, then you're probably going to like a vaccine passport. If you don't mind shutdowns, then maybe you don't care about a vaccine passport. But at the end of the day, if you're unvaccinated, stay home. Don't kill somebody you love. You won't grow out of that. And I'm out.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, first off, I want to reiterate that people do have celiac disease. About 1 out of 133 people. I looked it up, and so it does exist, but it's not as common as it's made out to be. That's basically what I was saying. Is I basically, Rob has been saying everything so incredibly well that it's hard to build on what he's saying. But I want to give a couple of examples, which is New Zealand and Hawaii. In the United States, Hawaii was very fierce all along about not letting people with COVID in. In fact, you can take a vacation now in Hawaii, and they basically have a double wall. You have to prove that you've been vaccinated, and you have to be tested to show that you don't have COVID. And if you do that, you can come and visit, and you can go from one island to another, and you can enjoy a vacation in Hawaii. And they don't have COVID. I mean, it works. And I'd like to see that happen in California. I don't think we should allow people from Alabama here. I just think we should just not allow them, because they've got this thing where they don't want to get vaccinated. And, it's up to them, but it's in California, we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. It's over 70%. You go to a city like San Francisco, it's something like 90%. We take it seriously. In the city where I live, even though it's got a very high vaccination rate, people started wearing masks again because of the danger of the new variants. So where people are acting responsibly, it's not fair for us to be subject to people who are acting irresponsibly. So the vaccine, we call it a vaccine passport, but it's just a way of verifying that people are acting responsibly. And I think the real challenge is to make sure that all the people in the world are able to get the vaccine. And I'm happy to see that the Biden administration has just bought another 150 million, which is of course a drop in the bucket in a world with 7 billion people. But every 150 million people that get vaccinated is 150 million more. And I know other countries besides the United States are working towards getting everyone vaccinated. I'm just thrilled to hear that you've been vaccinated, Sharif. I know that Malaysia is having a kind of tough time right now, and I'm just, really rooting for you guys in Malaysia to be able to get vaccinated enough that it starts, the problem dies down, and you don't have to worry anymore about your friends and neighbors. That'll be wonderful. So I think it's to sum up, I think it's a very reasonable way to kind of have your cake and eat it too, because it allows people to have their for whatever reason not get vaccinated, but it also allows us to protect ourselves from the people that are getting vaccinated and are acting responsible, to protect ourselves from the people who aren't. And so I think it's a very good solution to the problem of people not getting vaccinated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Jamsid.
Hi, Sharif. Thank you very much for this very important topic. I think a vaccine passport is just like showing your ID when you're trying to buy liquor, and it's the kind of thing where, you have no right to go into a store and buy the liquor. You have the privilege if you're above a certain age, and if you can prove that you're above a certain age. So this is the same thing. You have access to certain things, the ability to do certain things, if you meet certain criteria and you can prove it. And the passport is one way to do that. Now,
we didn't spend hardly any time talking about making that process easier, making sure that it's routine and believable, credible, so that it can't be forged easily. Those are the types of things that I think if we were talking about the real topic, that's what we would be talking about. But what we're talking about is coming from the fear of what could this mean? And I never think that we make our optimal decision making based on fear. And as long as we're afraid of something, we're afraid of the vaccine, we're afraid of the proof that we have vaccine, then we're going to make suboptimal choices. And I think if we could just reduce the level of fear and calmly evaluate the situation, then I think we're more likely to make good decisions. And it's no guarantees, of course. No, of course, a woman has the right to choose what to do with their own body, and any individual has the right to choose what they want to do to their own body. There's no question about that in my mind. And, this is something different, though. This is when you impact society, when you're going to take what you believe out into the world and infect other people. There you go, your rights. You don't have the privilege, you don't have the right to do that. It's the Statue of Liberty, not the Statue of License. You don't have the license to kill. There are people that do get licenses to kill, and they have to carry badges and stuff like that. They have to have certification. They have to have training. So these are the types of things that we are talking about. It's just, do you have rabies? I'd like to know. Do you have smallpox? I'd like to know. Do you have polio? I'd like to know. Measles? I'd like to know. This is part of living with others. And, sometimes it's a drag. Tough. So we can drop this macho attitude, you can't tell me what to do, and start thinking about how am I going to live with others? How am I going to live in a world where other people have rights too? They have the right to continue to exist without me taking it away from them. So what about that? What about thinking about others? Holy smokes. Then maybe we make a different decision than if we just think about ourselves. Thanks again, Sharif, for a wonderful topic.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, with my own vaccine passport, hopefully I will come to Malaysia and then see you all face to face at a conference sometime in the near future. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. It's really, really very important topic. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. From tomorrow we have conference 28, 29 and 30. Those who are our board of advisors, if you have any kind of plan or anything, you can share with us. And hopefully we will make a successful conference. But from the next month, we want to make a more effective conference, and we want to go for the scientific journals and magazine. So Professor Donalds, Mr. Adams, Mr. Jamesid, and all of our fellow, those who are join with us as our board of advisor, they can help us, they can work with us. We want to make a world-class think tank with our strong collaborations. So thank you everyone for joining today. Professor Donalds, Mr. Jamesid, and Mr. Adam, for joining. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye and take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you later.